Before she became a myth, she was a wound. A wound the world mistook for glamour, that Hollywood covered in sparkle, but that never stopped burning beneath the skin. Marilyn Monroe wasn't born an icon. She was born Norma Jeane, a little girl who learned far too early that beauty can open doors, but it can also close the soul. The camera loved her, yes, but the camera never told the truth. Behind every perfect smile, there was a doubt. Behind every unforgettable dress, there was a trembling child. And behind every headline that turned her into fantasy, there was a woman begging to be heard. Marilyn didn't change fashion with fabrics or trends. She changed it with fire. With the way she walked without apologizing. With the way she turned vulnerability into power. With the courage to claim her own image in a world that wanted to own her. She was desire, but also defiance. She was glamour, but also revolution. Her style didn't try to please. It tried to survive. And even so, in the middle of the chaos, she wrote a story no one has ever been able to replace. The story of a woman who transformed her pain into iconography, her fragility into a weapon, and her presence into an eternal legacy. This is not the story of a symbol. It is the story of the woman who changed the history of fashion forever. No one imagines that the most photographed woman of the century began her life running from family photographs that never existed. Marilyn Monroe was born as Norma Jeane Mortensen in a forgotten corner of Los Angeles, daughter of a mother trapped between mental fragility and poverty, and of a father whose name remained etched as silence. Her childhood had no iconic dresses and no studio lights. It had closed doors, endless moves, cold orphanages, and temporary homes, where she learned to smile because a smile was the only thing no one could take from her. While other girls played at being princesses, she played at surviving. She hid inside old magazines, where actresses seemed to live in a world that didn't hurt. She didn't know how or when, but something inside her whispered that one day she would escape the fate written for poor girls, to disappear without leaving a trace. She wanted to exist. She wanted to be seen. And in that desire burned a force that not even abandonment could extinguish. When she turned 16, she decided to marry just to escape the foster system. It wasn't love, it was strategy. But that decision led her to another. Working in a factory where a military photographer looked at her in a way no one ever had before. Not as an orphan, not as a quiet girl, but as a possible star. That moment changed her life. The camera found in her something she didn't even know she had, a light made of nostalgia, tenderness, and hunger for the future. That was the birth of Marilyn, even if Norma Jeane didn't know it yet. What she did know was something simple and wild. She would never again allow the world to decide who she was. Marilyn's rise was not immediate, but it carried the force of a silent hurricane. Norma Jeane began posing for the covers of cheap magazines, where her blonde curls and sweet smile seemed to illuminate even the roughest paper. Every session was a lesson, every photographer a mirror. She learned to control the light, to master her angles, to turn her shyness into magnetism. It wasn't luck, it was discipline disguised as innocence. When she arrived at the Hollywood studios, the executives thought they had found a doll. What they didn't know was that this doll possessed a fierce intelligence for constructing a persona. She created Marilyn Monroe with surgical precision. The soft voice, the warm gaze, the almost floating walk. Everything was a choreography designed to capture the world. And she did. Within months, her image began multiplying. Posters, ads, storefronts, dreams. But the real turning point came the day she dyed her hair platinum blonde. That color didn't just change her hair, it changed her destiny. It became a beacon, a symbol, a promise. The public didn't see Norma Jeane. They saw Marilyn, the luminous goddess who could make any pain feel lighter. The studios shaped her as a fantasy, but she understood that this fantasy could give her something she had never had: power. Her first films portrayed her as the naive girl, the distracted blonde, the easy joke, and yet beneath those superficial lines, Marilyn was already building her empire. She knew that if the world was going to see her as a dream, then she would control that dream. She would turn her own image into a brand, into a signature, into a style capable of challenging its era. The Marilyn phenomenon had begun, and still no one imagined how far it would go. The world saw her as a luminous comet, but that brilliance carried a price that only she was paying. While her films filled theaters and her face appeared on every corner of the United States, Marilyn began to understand that fame was not a refuge, but a labyrinth. The studios controlled her image, her schedule, her words, even her silences. They offered her roles of the dumb blonde, prefabricated laughs, and scenes that did no justice to the woman who thought, read, debated, and questioned everything. Behind the radiant persona was a woman tired of being reduced to a stereotype. Hollywood wanted her docile. She wanted dignity. Hollywood wanted her superficial. She wanted depth. Hollywood wanted her silent. She wanted a voice. Her rebellion began with small but decisive gestures. She started rejecting repetitive roles. She began studying acting with rigor, reading the great writers, seeking directors who could see more than her extraordinary beauty. And then came her first major public conflict. She refused to continue as the studio's decorative girl and demanded fairer contracts, better roles, artistic respect. The executives mocked her. They said she was nothing more than a pretty face. They said she was replaceable. They were wrong, because while they tried to keep her inside gilded cages, Marilyn was planning her escape. She knew the world desired her, but she also knew something far more powerful. The world needed her. It needed a woman who would break the mold, who would show that beauty was not synonymous with stupidity, that sensuality could be strength and not weakness. Amid media pressure and malicious rumors, Marilyn was taking shape as something bigger than an actress. She was about to become a cultural rebel, a woman who would change not only cinema, but also fashion, feminine identity, and the perception of power. And what was coming would be an earthquake. The earthquake began the day Marilyn decided to do the unthinkable, walk away from the studio system that had created her. In 1954, she broke the contract that kept her trapped in empty roles and, against all odds, founded her own production company. A woman in the 1950s, challenging Hollywood from the outside. It was a declaration of war, a silent revolution, an act of freedom so bold that even those who underestimated her were forced to stop and look. She didn't do it to make money. She did it to reclaim her identity, to choose stories that spoke truth, to work with directors who valued her intelligence and sensitivity, to prove she could be more than America's favorite object of desire. Her move echoed like a shout in an industry dominated by men who never imagined that the most famous blonde on the planet could also be a strategist, a businesswoman, a visionary. Her influence on fashion began turning into legacy during those years. She was no longer just a model of glamour. She was a creator of style. She made decisions that today seem simple, but were revolutionary at the time. Dresses that embraced the body without asking permission, necklines that spoke of autonomy rather than submission, shimmering fabrics that turned vulnerability into spectacle. Every public appearance was a visual manifesto, every look a declaration. Her white dress with the flying skirt, her gold satin gown clinging like a second skin, her fur coats worn with dignity, and not as trophies of luxury. Marilyn used fashion as a language, as a shield, as a weapon, and the world was listening. But while her image was ascending, her inner world was fracturing. Love, for her, was always a losing battle. Her marriage to Joe DiMaggio, the baseball hero, became an emotional prison marked by jealousy, reproaches, and mistreatment. What the public saw as the perfect couple was, for her, a minefield. And even so, when the door closed, Marilyn kept building the legend. She kept reinventing herself. She kept fighting. Because she knew her life wasn't going to save her. Only her art could. What came next was a dazzling mixture of triumph and storm. After separating from DiMaggio, Marilyn seemed to be reborn with a new, almost ferocious intensity. She returned to the studios with a determination no one expected from a woman whom the industry had treated as decoration for years. But she was no longer decoration. She was a creative force, fully aware of her worth and her power. During those years, she built some of the most iconic fashion moments of the 20th century. Her pink dress in "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend" wasn't just a movie costume, it was a manifesto, an elegant cry declaring that women could shine without apologizing, that glamour shouldn't be a prison, but an act of autonomy. No one had ever worn color the way she did. No one had ever understood so deeply the relationship between skin, light, and desire. With each appearance, she defined a new aesthetic standard. She created an imaginary world. Off-set, her style evolved into something more refined, more intimate, more her own. Capri pants that embraced her silhouette, fitted sweaters that turned the ordinary into pure sensuality, red lips as a non-negotiable signature. Marilyn proved that style didn't depend on luxury, but on attitude, on presence, on that magic that could turn the simplest gesture into a historic moment. Yet while the world celebrated the diva, the woman behind the myth suffered. The pressure for constant perfection suffocated her. Her love life was a broken puzzle, and her insecurities, the ones she had carried since childhood, intensified under Hollywood's relentless spotlight. Her marriage to Arthur Miller, the most brilliant intellectual of his time, seemed to promise refuge. But even there, in that deep yet impossible love, she discovered another form of loneliness. Marilyn wanted to be understood, not just admired. She wanted to be heard, not just observed. She wanted someone to see Norma Jeane behind the diamond. But the higher she flew, the farther away the roots that held her became. And even so, fractured as she was, she remained light. A light that would change fashion forever. There was something tragically beautiful in the way Marilyn fought her own ghosts while continuing to reinvent the aesthetics of the century. Her influence on fashion reached a crucial point when she decided to strip away the artifices and embrace a more authentic version of herself. She no longer sought to dazzle the world. She sought to understand it. She sought to understand herself. In New York, far from the control of the studios, she walked the streets in simple clothes that made her almost unrecognizable. Wide coats, classic jeans, dark glasses that hid both exhaustion and the need for anonymity. It was a style that contrasted with her public image, yet it set a powerful precedent. The most seen woman on the planet was redefining what it meant to be elegant. She showed that true sophistication didn't need sequins, but honesty. Still, when she returned to the spotlight, her glamour remained intact. No one knew how to wear a silk dress like she did. No one could turn a neckline into a cultural event. It was as if the ordinary was her refuge, and the extraordinary, her destiny. Between those two worlds, Marilyn created a visual language that influenced entire generations, from the supermodels of the 90s to today's it girls. Despite her impact, the industry continued treating her like an uncomfortable mystery. too beautiful to be taken seriously, too fragile to be considered a leader, too desired to be respected. That contradiction wore her down, and in the midst of that tension, her emotional health began to waver. The pills she took to sleep became a tightrope between calm and the abyss. The public's expectations were an impossible weight, and her loneliness grew deeper and deeper. But even in her darkest moments, fashion continued to see her as a guiding light. Haute couture houses copied her shapes. Photographers sought her as an eternal muse. The public found in her something beyond beauty. They found humanity, a humanity that shone and shattered at the same time. Marilyn didn't wear trends. She created them, and each one was a fragment of her soul trying not to disappear. The end of Marilyn was not a sudden fall, but a slow, almost silent fading, like a candle that burns too intensely to last. Each day seemed like a battle against an inner whirlwind made of exhaustion, expectation, and old wounds that never closed. Hollywood wanted her to keep shining. She only wanted to breathe. Her final years were marked by a painful paradox. The more fragile she became, the more powerful her cultural influence grew. In photo sessions like those by George Barris or Bert Stern, she revealed a vulnerability that shook the world. Loose hair, tired eyes, bare skin before the lens. She did not pose to seduce. She posed to be understood. And without knowing it, she inaugurated a new kind of beauty. The beauty of transparency. The beauty that does not try to impress. The beauty that simply exists. Fashion treated those images as gospel. Designers, photographers, magazines, all found in Marilyn an enigma they could not abandon. She embodied the eternal tension between glamour and tragedy, between desire and innocence, between strength and fragility. She was a mirror where society saw its deepest contradictions. But behind that iconography was an exhausted woman. The pressures of her last film, Something's Got to Give, blended with the emotional chaos of her private life. Broken relationships, friendships dissolving, rumors chasing her like shadows. The world speculated about her, but almost no one knew her. And the woman who had once taken control of her own image was beginning to lose control of her inner peace. Still, even in her final days, there were flashes of light. Spontaneous laughter during photo shoots. Letters where she expressed dreams yet to be fulfilled. Plans to return to cinema with dignity. Attempts to rebuild herself once more. But on the night of August 4th, 1962, the most photographed light of the century went out. And yet, her glow did not vanish. It transformed. It multiplied. It became eternal. Marilyn did not die as a symbol. She died as a woman, but she was born, forever, as a legend. Marilyn's death did not close a chapter. It opened an era in which her image stopped belonging to her and became the world's territory. Her face multiplied across magazine covers, exhibitions, speeches, imitations. But no copy ever reached the truth. Because Marilyn was not a hairstyle, nor a dress, nor a flirtatious gesture. She was an emotional revolution that culture was only beginning to understand. Starting in the 1960s, fashion embraced her as an eternal archetype. Andy Warhol turned her into a pop icon, elevating her face to the status of a contemporary myth. Fashion houses reinterpreted her aesthetic again and again. The fitted dress, the liquid shine, the red lips that seemed to hold a secret. But beyond those superficial elements, her deepest influence was the way she redefined femininity. Before her, society wanted proper women. After her, society wanted unforgettable women. Marilyn taught them that sensuality was not a sin, that vulnerability could be a form of power, that the female body should not be hidden, but understood. She didn't just wear fashion, she challenged it. She demanded that it keep pace with her inner life, her complexity, her light and shadow. The celebrities who came after studied her like a code. Madonna took her boldness. Naomi Campbell, her magnetism. Britney Spears, her fragility turned into spectacle. Lady Gaga, her courage to use image as armor. None of them would be exactly who they are without the woman who opened the path. And yet, even with all her influence, Marilyn remains a mystery, because her legacy cannot be measured in dresses or photographs. Her legacy is a question. How can a woman who suffered so deeply become the world's eternal fantasy? Perhaps the answer is that Marilyn never tried to be perfect. She tried to be free, and that freedom, even when broken, transformed culture forever. Ban ko mon tiep tuk dich, fan tiep theo kong. If there is something that distinguishes Marilyn's legacy from any other icon of the 20th century, it is the way her presence kept growing, even after she was gone. She is not just another star from Golden Age Hollywood. She is a language, a collective emotion, a wound shared between beauty and loss. Her image became a mirror where entire generations searched for meaning. In fashion, her impact continues to expand because Marilyn did not represent a single identity. She was many, contradictory, layered, and all true. She could be the most glamorous woman on the planet in a fitted satin dress, but also the simple young woman walking along the beach wrapped in an oversized sweater. That duality opened a new door for modern style, showing that a woman could be sensual and vulnerable, powerful and tired, luminous and human. Designers understood this with almost religious clarity. Tom Ford drew from her clean, direct sensuality. Jean-Paul Gaultier reinterpreted her playful, dangerous energy. Versace absorbed her bodily magnetism. Even Chanel found in her a perfect model for a femininity made of light and mystery. Every fashion house read her like a poem that never ends. In popular culture, Marilyn left a shadow impossible to ignore. Her image became a symbol of devastating fame, but also a metaphor for beauty that refuses to surrender. Actresses, singers, and models still copy her poses without realizing that what they seek is not her shape, but her authenticity. That small accent of sadness that made even her brightest smile feel human. And in the midst of all this, one truth remains undeniable. Marilyn Monroe changed the meaning of being a woman in front of a camera. Before her, the camera dictated. With her, the camera listened. That inversion of power transformed fashion, cinema, and culture. Because Marilyn never wanted to be a myth. But she became the most human myth of all. In the present day, more than half a century after her death, Marilyn remains an aesthetic compass. Her presence crosses eras, movements, and generations without losing strength. It is as if time itself had decided to preserve her not only as a historical figure, but as an eternal symbol of reinvention. Contemporary fashion continues to rewrite her legacy through new perspectives. Modern photographers study the way she posed. Never rigid, never calculated, always instinctive. Her body spoke its own language. It carried a fierce softness, a mixture of innocence and danger that no one has ever fully replicated. Even today, when a celebrity wants to evoke magnetism, the reference is still Marilyn. But her true revolution lies in how she changed the way women saw themselves. Before her, femininity was defined by strict rules: composure, discretion, perfection. Marilyn broke those rules without asking for permission. She turned imperfection into charm, vulnerability into beauty. She opened the door to a new way of expressing oneself through clothing, through the body, through presence. A woman no longer had to choose between being strong or sensual. She could be both. She could be many. She could be herself. And that changed everything. In cultural analysis, Marilyn also occupies a singular place. She represents the broken voice that keeps singing, the icon that shines even when it is shattered, the reminder that behind every perfect image, there is a complex story that deserves to be told. Today, her face continues to appear in murals, editorials, campaigns, and runways, not as an empty homage, but as an open question. What does it really mean to be unforgettable? What price is paid for becoming a symbol? And how could such a fragile woman build a legacy that no era has been able to surpass? Marilyn did not leave answers. She left an echo that fashion is still trying to decipher. Marilyn Monroe was not a character built by cinema. She was a woman built from her own wounds, her own dreams, and an aesthetic intuition that changed history without ever intending to. Her legacy cannot be explained merely through dresses, photographs, or films. It is explained through what she provoked, through the way she transformed the relationship between light and skin, between desire and power, between beauty and truth. Fashion found an entire language in her. Every gesture offered a lesson. Every appearance opened a new door. She did not design collections, nor create trends from an atelier, yet no fashion house of the last century has managed to escape her shadow. She was inspiration, disruption, mirror, and above all, she was humanity. Marilyn turned her fragility into a political act. She showed that the female body could be a territory of freedom and not of control. That sensuality did not need to submit, but to express itself. That behind the myth, there was a woman asking to be seen, not idealized. And that honesty, even when it destroyed her, became her greatest legacy. The history of global fashion changed when she appeared, not because she was perfect, but because she was inimitable. Because where others sought to please, she sought to exist. Where others sought to fit in, she sought to feel. And that approach, so simple and so painful, redefined the aesthetics of the 20th century forever. Today, Marilyn lives in every runway where a model walks without apology. She lives in every photograph that captures vulnerability without fear. She lives in every woman who dares to be both light and shadow at the same time. Her legacy is not a frozen image. It is a constant movement, an idea, an emotion that continues transforming the world. Marilyn Monroe did not change fashion. She changed the way we see ourselves. And that is what makes her eternal.